Shalom, shalom. Before I begin this lesson, I want to give all praise, honor, and the glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles, bishop, and elders of Great Millstone that rule well, and peace and blessings be multiplied on all you brethren out there teaching this word in all sincerity and in truth. Shalom to the elect, 144,000, and the rest of the elect out there. Shalom. I'm the brother Damal Gabar, here with another lesson, Lord willing to edify through the spirit and power of Yahweh by Yahweh Shai. All right, and I was reading this article here from Zero Heads. Title is Trump's Third World Immigration Ban a Precursor to the Insurrection Act. All right, and as I was reading this article, there were certain things that struck out to me, as I was reading it, which showing you, that this immigration ban, it could lead to the Insurrection Act. And one of the things that was said in this article is how he's basically could use this immigration ban to bring in the Insurrection Act, ultimately to not only deport, so-called immigrants here in this country, but it could also be used to basically come up against the prophets and the men of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, and basically, anybody that the president or this government deems as, problems in this American society, people like Antifa, people like the so-called Muslim Brotherhood, or anybody pretty much that they deem to be against the American way, insurrectionists, protesters, or basically any type of organization or persons that they deem to be un-American. And I thought it was very interesting, because we know, they're always looking for ways roundabout to come up against the prophets, to come up against the true men of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Because ultimately, they don't really have anything on the Hebrew Israelites, because they know ultimately that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They know that we're not out here trying to physically or be carnal. They know we're not trying to take up arms and take down this, to fight against the government. They know that's not our stance. They know that we're just out there preaching. We're just speaking. We're just, tearing down these strongholds and ultimately just prophesying and preaching the scriptures and exposing all the lies and the BS. So under, the Constitution, we're protected. We're legally within our rights to go out on the highways and the byways and to prophesy and to read the scriptures, to do these videos and do these shows. But, we know they're going to try to find some loophole around that. And this whole immigration ban and Insurrection Act could ultimately be a way in which they can, address the prophets and the men of the Lord, and to find a way to ultimately to, get us off the streets, to lock us up, to arrest us, or even deport us. And that's not far-fetched, because you read in Acts the 18th chapter, I think, who was that? Priscilla and Aquila. They had recently come from Italy, which was Rome, because I forget which Roman emperor it was. It's in Acts 18. You can go to it. He basically kicked all of the Jews out of Rome, because they were raised in all type of hell, because they were out there on the highways and the byways prophesying and preaching Yahweh Shai. You see, so it's not far fetched that this immigration ban and this Insurrection Act could be a way in which they could find a way to somewhat legally come up against this ministry and this truth. So that's what I want to go into. So let me read some of this article, and I got some precepts to go along with it. This is over the Thanksgiving holiday, U.S. President Donald Trump announced sweeping plans to tighten immigration rules, including a suspension on migration from the third world countries and cancellation of all federal benefits and subsidies to non-citizens in the country. The decision comes after a terror attack, the shooting of two National Guardsmen involving an Afghan migrant, Rahmanullah Lakhanwal, admitted to the U.S. under a program for Afghan refugees launched by Joe Biden in 2021. And like we always tell you, all this shit was all set up and staged. All right. Joe Biden was told to let these immigrants in so that, when Trump got in office, it would be a big issue. It would be a big deal. It would be another reason for them to, to basically to get Trump elected, to get him favored by the American people, and ultimately to allow a bunch of sleeper cells and migrants into this country so that these elites can create, order out of the chaos, man. We know that at the end of the day, this shit was all done intentionally. It was all part of the plan of these elites to, you know, to bring in this NWO and confusion and chaos and other things of that nature, right? It says, however, the Trump administration approved the man's asylum application in 2025 based on his aid to CIA operations in Afghanistan over a 10-year period. The smart move would have been to err on the side of caution, and this is a lesson Trump is apparently taking to heart, blah, blah, blah. Here we go. It says, in a pair of Truth Social posts late Thursday night, Trump said he would permanently pause migration from all third world countries to allow U.S. systems to fully recover. The president said he would also terminate millions of admissions under his predecessor, Joe Biden, and remove anyone. Here's the point. Anyone who is not a net asset to the United States or is incapable of loving our country. Now, don't you think that can be directed and pointed at the prophets? We know prophetically what we preach as concerning Babylon, the great America. People understand, our constant rebuking and getting on, this country for its wickedness, for its hypocrisy, for its for its disobedience against the Heavenly Father, for its ill treatment of the 12 tribes. We're constantly rebuking them on and getting on them for all of the injustices, the wickedness that was done to the Israelites, and just ultimately how this place is just a very unethical, unrighteous, cesspool of wickedness. You see, so anyone who is not a net asset to the U.S. or is incapable of loving our country, so they're showing you right there how they're trying to set it up to where not only can these immigrants be banned from this country, but they can come at anybody who they deem to be not an asset or incapable of loving this country. So that can easily be, aimed and pointed at the Hebrew Israelites, man. You see, and we're looked at as, the prophets of doom, the haters of this society, somebody who doesn't seem to be fit for, this country. So, we can fall under this category of, of being banned or being, deported out of this society or deemed non-lovers of this society. It says Trump added he plans to end all federal benefits and subsidies for non-citizens, denaturalize migrants who undermine domestic tranquility, and deport any foreign national he described as a public charge, security risk, or non-compatible with Western society. And now we know they're aiming this at so-called immigrants that's in this country that fit this description. But hey, we know this can eventually be aimed at so-called Americans that they deem to fall under this category. And we see how Trump comes after all of his political opponents. You see how he comes at anybody that's not praising him or kissing his ass or just going along with his administration as being the best that we've ever seen. You see anybody that questions or asks questions that he doesn't like, or anybody that scrutinizes what he's doing, they're instantly attacked. He comes at them, in a very harsh and negative way. You don't think that's going to apply to the prophets and us, what we're out there doing? You see, it says critics of Trump's argue that he has limited power to implement these changes on a large scale. Democrats are confident that their activist judges will be able to obstruct Trump's efforts, and many Islamic immigrant communities from immigrant communities have laughed off threats of deportations under the premise that they are protected by visa extensions, temporary protection status, and naturalization status. You see? And like I said, a lot of us American citizens, we're so-called protected by these constitutional rights, but we know under certain circumstances, under particular, executive orders, the Insurrection Act, him bringing in martial law. Hey, a lot of these protected statuses that even American citizens have can be taken away. Even some of these so-called protection that a lot of these migrants have under certain circumstances can be taken away, man. You see? So I thought this article was very interesting, showing you how, they could, like I said earlier, they could legally, legally we're protected, but those laws can be taken away. Your constitutional rights can be stripped under certain executive orders or under certain, national security risks. They'll be able to deem anybody they want to be an enemy or unprofitable or chargeable. You see, and like I said, it's somewhat legal, but then it's not legal at the same time. Like I said earlier, legally we're protected by the Constitution. You have right to free speech. You have the right to do this, the right to do that. But under certain executive orders and certain laws that can be passed, those rights can be taken away, and you can be, deemed an enemy of these United States here. And this is Isaiah chapter 10, verse 1. It says, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless." You see, and this is what a lot of these laws are going to be implemented to do in these, as times get more and more chaotic, as these devils look to bring in the chaos, to bring in the order, to bring in this new world order, to basically to be able to come against, to wage war against you American citizens, and deem everybody untrustworthy and everybody an enemy and a potential enemy, unless they, eventually give up your biometrics and submit yourself into this digital technocracy, this digital enslavement, in the near future. You see, it says Amos chapter 5, verse 10. It says, "They hate him that rebuketh in the gate, and they abhor him that speak uprightly." You see? And this is the category they're going to ultimately label the prophets and the true men of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai under, man. All right. Remember, like I said, they're going to be able to deem anybody that they seem to be anyone who is not a net asset to the United States or is incapable of loving our country. And we can easily be labeled under that category. Because like I said, because how the scriptures and prophecy preaches against Babylon the Great. And we're out here telling them the judgment that awaits this society. How is the sinful kingdom? How is, it's 100% against the Most High, is rooted in sorcery and witchcraft, is corrupt, is evil, and going, and exposing the agenda that they're truly trying to unleash upon the world. So we could easily fall under that category. And it says here, what? It says, "And deport any foreign national he described as a public charge, a security risk, or non-compatible with Western civilization." And like I said, of course, they're aiming this at migrants, but you already know they're gonna use that and point it at certain American citizens here that's not patriotic, that's not going along with the status quo. Anybody that's gonna call out the corruption or the BS or expose the BS, you're going to be labeled under this category as well. Not just migrants, but eventually you American people. You see? What else is in here? It says U.S. blah, 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 blah. It says U.S. House Representative Ilman Omar claims Trump doesn't understand the laws on TPS, for example, and argues that vast majority of Somali migrants are safe from deportation. It says the recent attack in Washington, D.C., combined with mass interference from NGO-funded activists and Democrat leaders calling for the military to resist Trump's illegal orders, is a blazing clear path to one conclusion: the Insurrection Act. See? And these devils are waiting to use it, and they are going to use it. Because why? They're going to create certain scenarios and certain events that's going to leave this administration no choice but to invoke this Insurrection Act, man. And it's all part of them bringing everybody into this new world order, into this digital technocracy. You see, and there's going to be more National Guards attack. There's going to be more, or there's going to be more National Guard attacks or attacks on these ICE agents, or on the flip side, you're going to start having ICE agents or even the National Guard eventually get trigger happy and lay down a bunch of American citizens, which is going to create what? Chaos, man. Which is going to bring more division and more civil war to this society, to where something along those lines. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen exactly like that, but we know it's going to be some event that's going to eventually bring in the Insurrection Act. And what is the Insurrection Act? Let's look it up real fast. It says the Insurrection Act in 1807 is the U.S. federal law that empowers the President of the United States to nationally deploy the U.S. military and to federalize the National Guard units of the individual states in specific circumstances, such as suppression of civil disorder, of insurrection, and of armed rebellion. You see? And like I said, something is going to happen to where they're going to eventually bring in the Insurrection Act. And you can already see the stage being set. You already see the pieces being put in place. Now they're activate. Now Trump wants his, the fast acting National Guard response, to where they're going to have over 500 National Guardsmen for every state here in America. You know, and now since that so-called shooting of those 2 National Guard troops, they're increasing the number of National Guard troops. You see? So, and they're being trained for what? Civil disobedience, for protesting with batons and bats and mace and spray. So you can already see, you know, they're setting these guardsmen in place, you know, because they foresee something of that nature, which is going to happen, to where they're going to eventually bring in the Insurrection Act, man. And it's going to basically deem everybody in these United States an enemy until proven otherwise. And how are you going to be able to prove that you're a law-abiding fellow citizen and you're with this society? Is by giving up your biometrics, by allowing yourself to be identified on the grid, to where your access to the internet, your access to do, you know, to drive, your driver's license, your access to be identified as a law-abiding, digitally recognizable American citizen. You see? And this is what all this is ultimately leading to. All right. Them to be in a position to have more control, and also to come up against the undesirables, you know, whether it's so-called migrant, which that's all an excuse. You know, that these migrants are just and immigrants are just being used as an excuse for them to be able to wage war on all you American citizens, you know. Take away your rights, take away take away your firearms, and to bring you into this new world order, man. It says third world migrant colonies in the U.S. might not be as safe as they think they are. Trump focus has been on Somali enclaves in places like Minnesota, where over 25% of all Somalis in the U.S. have congregated, but the problem of migrant colonies is far reaching. The surge of Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio took center stage during the president debates in 24 and then tapped into a national conversation about limitations on lack of assimilation by third world asylum seekers. Muslim enclaves in places like Dearborn, Michigan are another hot topic, with Islamic fundamentalists now essentially running the city and many residents calling for Sharia law. And you see, and these things were done intentionally, man. Joe Biden was told to bring in all these migrants, to bring in all these foreigners into this country for this very purpose, so they can eventually, bring in this Insurrection Act, you know, cause more division, and eventually be able to use, you know, mass deportations and, bringing in these different ICE agents to eventually be able to bring in this Insurrection Act and be able to wage war on all American citizens, man, and eventually bring everybody into this new world order. And eventually they're going to start telling these migrants, okay, if you want to be in this country, you're going to have to be biometrically, allowed to be in this country. You know, it's all part of their agenda and all part of their plans, man. But we can't be ignorant to any of these things, okay? And it's another excuse for them to come up against, anybody that's against what they're doing, anybody that's exposing the wickedness of this society, man. It says Trump already has the ability to cancel TPS extensions, cancel extensions on visas, and expand the ban on immigrant and visa applications from any country he chooses. However, under the Insurrection Act, Trump can deploy the National Guard for direct deportations rather than simply acting as a barrier between ICE agents and protesters. This would expedite deportations far beyond what is currently possible, you see? And this is why all this shit was set up, for them to do exactly that. Well, like I said, it's not just going to be for these migrants. It's going to be for eventually all American citizens, you know? It says, of course, there will be accusations of constitutional violations from both Democrats and Republicans. That said, many of these people may not realize how substantial the public support for deportation is. According to the survey, 66% of Americans agree with Trump's deportation policies, even if a migrant has not committed a crime from entry into the country. Furthermore, around 40% of Americans back the use of military for deportation. Yeah, they back it for deportation, but little do they know it's going to eventually be aimed at these American citizens, man. You see, because as these devils tighten the squeeze, as this economy continues to go to shit, as things get more expensive, as a lot of these homeowners get priced out of their homes, these businesses continue to collapse, these mass layoffs happen through AI and artificial intelligence, and the squeeze is put upon the everyday average American. Hey, these same um, ICE agents and National Guard and eventual military that's going to be used to come up against these migrants and these immigrants is going to be eventually turned around and used on them. Eventually, when all hell really breaks loose and these people really, get phased out of the society. You see, it says, and that's what these people are not, banking on. That this heavy militarization and boots on the ground here on America will ever be used against these American citizens. But it will be eventually. It says that's not a majority, but it's a massive portion of the population. If Trump were to implement the Insurrection Act, it is likely that he would receive a groundswell of popular support. Yeah, until it's pointed at them. It says, in other words, lack of integration among third world asylum seekers is self sabotage. They have become comfortable with the idea that the U.S. laws prevent any real intervention against the process of cultural invasion, but this can change rather quickly. For naturalized citizens, there are roadblocks in place, but for all other migrants, the breaking point has just arrived. Yeah, like I said, yeah, there's certain. For naturalized citizens, there's certain roadblocks in place, but with certain executive orders and certain laws that can be passed, you could be in as much danger as these immigrants are from being deported, from being thrown in concentration camps, from being put in these detention centers, which we know is going to eventually happen after, the full economic collapse of Babylon the Great happens. As the squeeze continues to get tighter, as more people get laid off, as more people, become homeless, lose their apartments, lose their houses, lose their vehicles, lose jobs, lose money, it's going to eventually this same insurrection act and the same military that's going to be used against these migrants are going to be used against you American people. And we know it's going to be used to come up against the prophets and the men of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, man. And this is Isaiah chapter 29, verse 21. I'm going to read up. Then 20, it says, for the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed, and all that watch for iniquity are cut off, that make a man an offender for a word, and lay a snare for him that reproveth in the gate, and turn aside the just for a thing of naught. You see, and this is what all this the stage is being set for. All of this immigration ban, all of this insurrection act, all of this national troop readiness response team, the ICE agents coming here. Remember, those ICE agents are locking up and deporting American citizens who are not standing for these migrants and immigrants who are in this country but are not a threat, that's not committing crimes, that's here just making an honest living. You're seeing people protest and fight for their so-called rights to be here, and it's only and we know it it's only gonna it's only going to get more and more crazier, man. Eventually, like we said, remember Trump said they're trying to fight the enemy from within. And like I said, and they're gonna, that's gonna be a very broad stroke with who can be labeled under that title. And we know it's gonna be labeled at the prophets and the men of the Lord pretty soon, man. So this is why we're telling you, Jakes, man, to get your mind right and to get this truth while you can, because hey, the famine of the word is coming, man. And this is Revelations 2:10. It says, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison that you may be tried. You see? Because some of us are going to get locked in prison for this truth, for this gospel, for this ministry, for telling the truth, for calling out the BS, man. It says, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life, man. All right. And I'm going to get this last one, and then I'm going to close it. This is Amos chapter 8 and 11. It says, behold, the days come, saith the Lord Yahweh, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. All right, because pretty soon, Hey, reading the Bible and what we're out here doing is going to be deemed illegal. It's going to be deemed un-American, you know, traitorous, you know, worthy of being locked up, being deported, losing your American citizenship, not being deemed worthy to be allowed to be an American citizen. You see, that's why we're telling you, Jake, to get this word while you can. Hey, because once martial law is enacted and this insurrection, that we're not going to be out there on the highways and the byways prophesying in the midst of all of this, all hell breaking loose and mass protests and all this sedition going on out there on the streets, man. And we know eventually it's going to be illegal to even to upload these videos on the internet. Hey, once these devils come with these digital IDs and your ability to be logged on, to log on to YouTube or Facebook or to even use social media is going to be under this, digital ID situation. They're going to be shutting down any video that they deem to be, mis or disinformation or anything that goes against the status quo. You see, so it's going to be what? A famine of the word, both digitally and physically. It says, and they shall wander from sea to sea, and from the north even to the east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of Yahweh, Bashem Yahweh Shai, and shall not find it. You see? And in that day shall the fair virgins and young men faint. Right. For thirst. And what is the thirst? This wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. So, hey, you can see the stage is being set, man. I just thought this was an interesting article because, when you read, the underlining, things that are in this article, you can see how these devils are getting ready to make a move. And there's a lot more into this article and into what they're trying to do than that's just right there on plain paper. We can see, we're reading behind the lines of what this ultimately is going to produce. We see it as clear as day, man. So with that, Lord willing, this is edifying. All praise, honor, glory to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai for putting the spirit in me to do this lesson. Lord willing, you are edified. To the next one, shalom.